Alright, so here's our homework for this week, and I'm going to try and zoom in for better clarity. So our first question says, Mr. Campbell took out a loan to buy a brand new speedboat. The cost was $22,000 with a 4.5% simple interest rate over a term of 4 years. What is the total amount paid? So when I see interest problems, I like to first figure out what type of interest I am solving for. And so in this problem, I see this thing bolded that says simple. So when I think of the formula that I'm going to use, I know that this is going to be interest equals principal times rate times time. So there's my formula I'll be using, and then I can go back into my problem and find the numbers to substitute into my equation that I've written here. So this equation is for simple interest. So as I substitute, they don't give us the interest, but they do give us the principal of $22,000. And this is going to, I'm going to multiply this by my rate of 4.5%. So here's a little side note. So when I have 4.5%, I can't put percents into my problem, so I'm going to have to divide this by 100 before I put it into my equation. So 4.5% divided by 100 is going to leave me with 0.045. And then my time has to be in years, and since I already have it in years, I can go ahead and substitute this for my time. So when I multiply all these across, I'm going to get 22,000 times 0.045 times 4. My interest that I've earned, or that I've paid, is going to be 3,960. But this equals, this amount of money here is the interest that Mr. Campbell paid on his loan. So this isn't the total amount, because in our equation they're asking for the total amount paid, not for this different one. This is interest paid. So these are both different amounts. So in order to find, so here's my solution here, but in order to find the total amount paid, I'm going to have to take 3,960, and I'm going to have to add that to my principal, and that's going to equal A, which is our total amount. So here, when you have simple interest, you simply add the principal in order to get your total amount. Okay, so moving down, what is the length of the missing side? So here we're dealing with the Pythagorean theorem. And the Pythagorean theorem states, for our formula, that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a and b represent the legs of the triangle. So this is a leg, and this is a leg. And these can be either A or B. And the length that is, I always like to, if you draw a line into this right angle right here, this arrow points to the hypotenuse, or C, and this always has to be the longest length. So as I substitute the numbers that I know, I'm going to just label 8 as A, and I'll label this one as B. 8 squared plus B squared equals 11 squared. And as I simplify this, I'll have 64 plus B squared equals 121. So the problem here is that I need to get this B squared by itself. So in order to do that, I need to isolate it, and I can do that by zeroing out this 64 from both sides, and I'll be left with, this will become 0, and I'll be left with B squared equals 121 minus 64, which is 57. So 57 equals B squared. And here they're asking us to find B. They're asking us to find just B, not B squared. So in order to find B squared, we're going to have to take the square root of both sides, because the inverse operation of squared is square root. So when we square root B squared, we'll be left with this, and then you'll be able to take the square root of 57. Moving over here, and now we're looking for the length of the missing side. So as I showed you before, this square in the corner kind of creates an arrow, and this arrow is pointing to C, or the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. So we know that these can be A and B, and the legs, it doesn't matter which side is A or which side is B. I like to label the shortest one A, but once again, we have our formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So as I substitute these numbers in, I'm going to have 4 squared plus 5 squared equals C squared. And as I simplify, we're going to have 16 plus 25 equals C squared. And when I add those two up, 16 plus 25, we'll be left with 41 equals C squared. And once again, we're looking for C by itself, C by itself. And since I can't just erase the squared, like I'm not allowed to do that, I have to keep it there. It's still there. We have to take the square root of both sides, and we'll be left with our answer for C. Okay. We'll read this problem. Andrew walks east from his home to his friend's house, a distance of 8 blocks. He then walks 5 blocks south to get to school. If he walks straight home after school and takes the shortest path diagonally across the park, approximately how long will his walk home be? So we're starting with Andrew. So he's starting at home. This is our first place. And he's going to walk across to his friend's house, and he's saying this is 8 blocks. And then from his friend's house, he's going to walk down to school 5 blocks. And then they're asking how long will this length be? So this looks like to me another Pythagorean theorem question. So we're going to have our formula of A squared plus B squared equals C squared. As I substitute these numbers in, I have, once again, I like to label my shortest length as A, But it really doesn't matter as long as C is our longest length. So we have 5 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. And again, we can simplify. I forgot to put my S for solution on the last one. So this will simplify to 25 plus 64 equals C squared. And as I add these two together, 25 plus 64, I'm going to get 89 equals C squared. And hopefully by this point we know we are just trying to find C, not C squared. So I'm going to have to take the square root, because the inverse operation of squared is the square root, and we'll be left with our answer. All right, moving on to, this is Wednesday's homework. We have a test this Tuesday, so we're not giving you homework on the night of your test. So scientific notation. In order to write scientific notation, there are some things we have that are required for our answer. So we have to have a number between 1 and 10, and this is being multiplied by 10 to some exponent. So in order to have a number between 1 and 10, I like to look where my decimal point is, and with whole numbers, our decimal point is at the end. And so in order to get this decimal point to a place where it would be between 1 and 10 is right here, because this would give us 1.4. But now I need to know how many times I would have to move it. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. So this is going to be 1.4 times 10 to the 6th place, because positive exponents make large numbers. And then again, starting with our decimal point. So on this one, our decimal, this was our starting. But here, this is our start. And this is a small number, but again, we have to have our number between 1 and 10 multiplied times 10 to some exponent. And so this one's going to have to be moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it has to be between the 7 and the 5. And then we'll be able to put in the exponent of how many times. So the exponent represents the number of times the decimal moves. All right, so moving down, here we go again with the Pythagorean theorem. So this time we have another right triangle. So here's my arrow, and this arrow is pointing to C, or the hypotenuse. So our formula, again, A, I like to label as the shortest, and B. So our formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And as I substitute my numbers, I have 8.8 squared plus 12.5 squared equals c squared. So these ones are decimals, but it's still the same thing. Squared is the same thing. So when something is squared, you're multiplying it by itself. So it's just saying what's 8.8 times 8.8. So we have 77.44 plus 0.5 times 12.5, 156.25, and this equals c squared. So we're going to have to add those two up. So adding 156.25 plus 77.44. So we'll be left with 9, 6. 7 and 6 is hold on. 77.44 plus 156.25. So this is 13, and then 5 and 7 and 6 again is 13, and we're left with 233.69 equals c squared. So then once again, we're looking for c. So we're looking for c, not c squared. So having to take the square root of both sides and be able to get our answer of c, because the square root of c squared is c. Alright, another Pythagorean theorem. Maybe you have already mastered these, and so you don't even need my help anymore, but I will just go ahead and keep writing. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So here's my arrow pointing to c, and then we can label our other two legs as a and b. So we're going to have a squared plus 7 squared equals 9 squared. So that's how I substitute. And then for my solution, a squared plus 49 equals 81. So here, once again, I need this a squared by itself, because now we're looking for a. And so in order to get this a squared by itself, I'm going to have to subtract 49 from both sides. So a squared equals 81 minus 49. And we'll be left with 32. And once again, looking for a, not a squared. So square root of both sides, and we'll be left with our answer. Alright, and last one for this day's. A 14-foot ladder is leaning up against a building. The top of the ladder is 11 feet above the ground. Approximately how far from the base of the building is the bottom of the ladder? Okay, that's a lot of words. So let's start with the beginning. A 14-foot ladder. So we see here, this says our ladder. So this is 14 feet. And then it says it's leaning against a building, and the top of the ladder, so here's the top, right? This is 11 feet from the ground right here. And our question is approximately how far from the base of the building is the bottom of the ladder. So here's the bottom of the ladder. So we're looking, this is our question mark right here. So we can assume that this is a, so here's our arrow pointing to C. So our formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And once again, using our to label our triangle. We have substitute our a squared, since we don't know it, plus 11 squared equals 14 squared. So as we simplify, a squared plus 121 equals 196. And then we have to solve by subtracting 121 from both sides, because we have to get this a squared by itself. A squared equals 6 minus 1 is 5, 9 minus 2 is 7. A squared equals 75, and up here it says to round to the nearest tenth. So the tenth equals 1 decimal place. Alright, so there's that week's, or those 2 days, and then we have one more for Thursday's homework that's due on Friday. Miss Walton starts buying lots of candy for her class. She spends so much money, she has to get a candy loan from the bank. She borrows $800 and ends up paying $250 interest over a course of 5 years. What is her interest rate? Okay, so as we go through this one, I want to start with what our formula is. So the things that they're giving us, we have $800. So this is our principal. 250 is our interest, and 5 years is our time. So we're looking for our interest rate. So we're looking for the rate, or R. So from reading this, we know that we're going to be using our simple interest formula. So I equals P, R, and T. And as I substitute these, I just substitute the numbers that I know. I know that 250 is my interest, and this equals 800 for my principal, and multiplying this times my rate, I'll leave that R there, and then 5 for time. So when I see this here, I know that I can multiply these two together. So 800 times 5 is 4,000. So I have 4,000, and then I still have this being multiplied by R, and this equals 250. So in order to get this R by itself, because that's what they're looking for, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 4,000. And this will become, I'm going to move this way. So R will be equal to 250 divided by 4,000. So this will give you a decimal, but remember the interest rate needs to be a percent. So in order to turn a decimal to a percent, you have to multiply by 100. Okay. So could the following side lengths form a right triangle? So for Pythagorean's theorem, if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, if these equal each other, yes, we have a right triangle. If a squared plus b squared does not equal c squared, no right triangle. So as you remember that C always that was wrong spelling. C is always the longest. The longest, struggling with my spelling, is the longest side. So I'm going to just go ahead, and this is always going to be C, this is C, and this is C. So I can just substitute these. Here's my formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So as I substitute these in, 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. So as I solve this one here, have 9 plus 16 equals 25, and then determine yes or no. So I'll let you look at those ones. And here's another one. Again, our formula. When you see right triangles, remember that this is when the Pythagorean theorem comes in handy. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then here's our arrow. This is pointing to 13.2 equals C. And then A and B are other legs. So 3.8 squared plus B squared equals 13.2 squared. And I think if you've watched my video up to this point, you would be able to solve and make sure that you end up with just B equals. So here's another word problem. We have a 26-inch TV has a diagonal length of 26 inches. If the height of the TV is 12.7 inches, what is the approximate measure of the TV's length? Okay, so we see our right triangle. So this is pointing to the hypotenuse, or C. And we know that these have to represent our other legs, so A and B. So they tell us the height of the TV is 12.7 inches. So 12.7 inches. So now we just have our right triangle, 12.7 and 26. And so if this is A and B, we can go ahead and solve for B with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. As I substitute this, we have 12.7 squared plus B squared equals 26 squared. And then our solution, remember that when you get down to 12.7 times 12 So this is 161.29 plus B squared equals 26 times 26, 676. And then subtract 161.29, 61.29. And then we'll be left with B squared equals that number. And then to make sure to take the square root. Alright, so there's your homework for the week. Hopefully these are helpful, and make sure to write your name on it so you can get credit. All right, have a good week.